Hi everybody, this is Dino Chris from Prehistoric Facts. This is a special episode, so let's actually get right to it. And basically, the dinosaur we'll be talking about today is Kosmoceratops. Now, Kosmoceratops in Greek or Latin means ornate horned face. Fossils are found in North America, basically Utah and Colorado. Late Cretaceous, 75 to 65 million years ago, about 15 feet long, and probably would have weighed around 1 to 2 tons. Of course, it's a herbivore, basically a ceratopsian, and basically the discovery of this dinosaur was actually a few years ago, basically, and it was believe it was Scott Hartman that it was the paleontologist that is actually well known for being on Dinosaur Train, who also known as Dr. Scott, basically. He actually made this discovery, and you see, he actually found this. It was basically the skull. It was basically the skull of this particular ceratopsian. And this ceratopsian has this weird, all these configurations of horns all over its skull, even including the frill. I mean, it's just amazing to look at this skull. Now, basically, the brow horns would actually be heading towards sideways. So basically, the brow horns would be going like this way. It does have a very small nose horn, so basically, it's not going to do very much in terms of defense. Basically, on the frill, on the top of the frill, you actually got some horns that are kind of curving downwards, and then basically on the sides, some of these horns are actually kind of straight and triangular, and basically the frill actually does have holes, so basically that means that it would have actually been covered in skin, basically not much of keratin, so pretty much would actually been filled with a lot of blood vessels and all that sorts of stuff. And so basically around that time of Kosmoceratops is basically there's a huge diversity of ceratopsians, that are actually back in North America back then was just like a dinosaur factory. I mean, it was just you could create all these you have these ceratopsians being evolving all the time, and also hadrosaurs evolving all the time, and even tyrannosaurs. So basically, this was actually a good time to actually be a ceratopsian, because basically that's when ceratopsian diversity was at its peak, 75 million years ago. And then basically when it got to 65 million years ago, the ceratopsians diversity has dropped, and basically it's because that's when dinosaurs are starting to actually really kind of lose their diversity a bit, and mammals are starting to rise in diversity. But even though, back again to Kosmoceratops, basically the frill and the horns were basically mostly for display purposes, really, basically for mating and territorial disputes between males, and pretty much facial recognition as well. So that's what most of these are actually. That's what most ceratopsians are actually built for their frills and their horns. Is that they're used for display purposes. I mean, they have somewhat sort of use for defense, but even though they're not really designed that way, unless if you're Triceratops. So pretty much the display purposes for most ceratopsians in terms of their frills. The horns can be used for some defense, but even though they're not really used for that much, but even though Kosmoceratops, the only way it could defend itself is basically swinging that head from side to side in order to actually aim at the legs of the Tyrannosaur, because basically Tyrannosaurs would actually have been the enemy of Kosmoceratops. Possibly Tyrannosaurs such as Albertosaurus, Daspletosaurus, those types of dinosaurs that would have been around at that time. So pretty much they would have actually been pretty common prey for Albertosaurus and Daspletosaurus. But even though Daspletosaurus is kind of built more for taking on ceratopsians, whereas Albertosaurus is actually kind of more built to taking on hadrosaurs. But even though both of them actually have the same way of the same diversity of prey they could go after. But even though Kosmoceratops probably did live in herds, but even though there's some debate about like certain ceratopsians that actually lived in herds or not, and basically like Triceratops, do we actually know that they live in herds? Because most of the specimens have been found are basically individual specimens. But even though there's been cases of where like there's been like more than one Triceratops found in the same place, But even though it's still up in the air, but even though it's probably more likely that they did live in herds, probably small herds, probably not like really large herds, probably between basically 10 to possibly maybe up towards 30, because basically that would actually be the better choice for these animals, especially. But even though males would actually probably be more on their own a little bit more than the females. But even though there's basically going to be one bull male in a herd, and basically once the male offspring actually start to get older and get to a certain age where basically they're going to start challenging the older male, the bull male, then basically the bull male would actually kind of chase them out. Because basically they would have to be on their own in order to survive and also find a herd that they can actually be a leader of. But even though most of those most of those males actually got killed by tyrannosaurs and dromaeosaurs during that time. And basically the only media attention that Kosmoceratops has ever gotten is basically in Dinosaur Train, where basically it shows like it's got like this a brilliant headgear structure. But even though it's because it's for display purposes. And so, but even though Kosmoceratops should actually get a little bit more attention in the media, I would love to actually see maybe more of a TV show in terms of certain dinosaurs, maybe like a TV movie that might actually show Kosmoceratops, or even maybe if Hollywood is actually willing to add more dinosaurs into some of the Jurassic World films, maybe they might actually put in Kosmoceratops if they actually want to. But even though it's such a new discovery that basically maybe Hollywood might not actually think that it's probably good enough to actually put into a movie. But even though but the extinction of Kosmoceratops is basically just climate changes. But even if it did live towards 66 million years ago, during the time of the extinction, I mean, it could have been wiped out by the cataclysmic event, basically by the asteroid that hit the Gulf of Mexico, and basically just caused huge huge changes in the environment. But even though volcanic eruptions could be a catalyst, but even though the formation of the Rocky Mountains were probably the downfall for Kosmoceratops, basically, because if you actually look at the fossil record in terms of Western North America, after 70 million years, pretty much between 75 to 70 million years ago, you start to see dinosaurs start to go in decline pretty fast, due to the fact that the formation of the Rocky Mountains kind of actually had dinosaurs probably live in different areas, and also probably didn't want to live in certain like lowland areas. Probably like Kosmoceratops probably lived in maybe like in higher altitude regions, probably more like maybe say say possibly between 1,000 to possibly 5,000 feet is above sea level, because then basically it actually would make sense to basically say that since Kosmoceratops is very rare, that maybe it was not really common in the floodplain areas. But even though it's still up for debate. All right, that's it for now. Now basically the 25th of September will actually be the new answering questions episode, and I've already got some pretty good questions already sent in. But even though, if you still got questions about dinosaurs or any other prehistoric life, feel free to email me at dinocris71@gmail.com, or let's go on the Facebook page, Prehistoric Facts with Dino Chris. Like the page, you can actually post your questions in the comment section on any Facebook post. But remember, keep your questions short to the point. Don't be afraid to actually post them on the wall as well. I'm willing to accept that. You can also follow me on Twitter at CSGRALL. That's my Twitter page. I post pretty cool stuff on there. Also, take care of the people around you. And also, for your younger people out there, make sure to listen to your parents, your teachers, and your guardians. Those are the best motivation you can have for a good education. It's very important to have a good education. Because with a good education, you get a good job in the future. All right, that's it for now, and I'll see you guys on the 25th, basically.